Hello viewers, today I want to show you guys an interview that I watched that I thought it was really interesting and I want to talk about it. Former Intercept journalist Jeremy Scahill was interviewed by Ayman Mohyeldin on MSNBC 3 days after the killing of Hamas's political leader Yahya Sinwar. I'm just going to play it and then we can pause a little and talk about it.
Co-founder of Dropsite News and co-founder of The Intercept. Jeremy, it's great to see you again. I know you've covered Hamas extensively throughout the year. You know a lot about Yahya Sinwar and other Hamas leaders. Can you tell us why, first of all, he has been so controversial as a figure to the Israelis and the Americans even before October 7th?
Yeah, I just want to begin by saying that as we're speaking tonight, the Israelis are waging an extermination campaign in the north of Gaza. For the past 2 weeks, they've surrounded the area and they've intensified it after the killing of Yahya Sinwar. No food or medicine of any kind has reached most parts of the north. I'm in direct touch. I'm in with medical officials in the north and with journalistic colleagues. I understand that at least 80 people have been killed tonight in a horrifying set of attacks on half a dozen residential buildings. I've just gotten done seeing images from the ground where children are being shredded like meat in a butcher shop. I don't understand how any of us, whether we're journalists or not, this isn't about objectivity, how any of us can watch this genocide unfold in real time and watch the pontificating of the politicians running for president and not just cry out, this has to stop.
There's a lot of stuff I really love about his response here. I think firstly, it's just that, before answering any questions about Sinwar specifically, he immediately turns focus to the situation on the ground in Gaza and the effects of Israel's genocidal onslaught. There is endless amount of death and destruction. Many parts of Gaza have been flattened to the point where it looks like a different planet. We've seen some of the most horrifying images a person can imagine coming out of Gaza in the past year. He draws specific attention to Israel's current extermination campaign in northern Gaza, a product of what Israel calls the General's Plan, where they are ethnically cleansing the population at gunpoint, and after a certain period of time claiming that anyone that's still remaining in northern Gaza will turn into a combatant. They raided a hospital, kicked out and brutalized patients, destroyed most of the area, and have apparently taken a number of medical workers hostage. All of this stuff is happening right now, and on these mainstream networks, if you just scroll through their pages, no one is talking about it. It's like if you're on social media and following the people on the ground there, you can see, oh, this is a Holocaust. A Holocaust is happening live. It's being live streamed, essentially. So Scahill, even just bringing these things up in an interview that's ostensibly about Sinwar, it's really important, I think, and you can tell how strongly he feels about this and how much he cares, and the frustration, in his voice, you can hear it. Another thing he does is he calls out MSNBC directly, accusing them of spreading pro-Israel propaganda, or essentially manufacturing consent for genocide.
This has to stop. We've looked at this. I know you've reported on the ground from Gaza. We're watching a genocide in real time. And I'm sorry, but on this network also, there are people who have promoted propaganda from Israel. There are people cheerleading for those running for office who are lying to the American people about concern for the Palestinians. And yes, we should talk about Yahya Sinwar. But Yahya Sinwar is also in many ways the story of Gaza.
MSNBC has been one of the worst offenders in its double standards of how it covers Palestinian people. In the first 100 days after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, 262 children were killed. In the first 100 days of Israel's assault on Gaza, more than 10,000 children were killed. But on MSNBC, mentions of child deaths and related terms were 33.4% higher for Ukraine than for Gaza. For each child death from Ukraine, children received the equivalent of 16.1 mentions on air, whereas children in Gaza received the equivalent of 0.36 mentions. In the first 100 days after October 7th, MSNBC did not run a single segment that focused specifically and exclusively on the plight of children in Gaza. Meanwhile, they ran over a dozen segments focusing specifically on the plight of Ukrainian children in that same time span. On CNN and MSNBC, emotive words such as brutal, massacre, slaughter, barbaric, and savage were overwhelmingly used to describe the killing of Israelis and Ukrainians, and almost never used to describe the killing of Palestinians. By October 11th, the official death toll in Gaza had passed that of the October 7th attack, but the rising death count and humanitarian crisis unfolding did not get the sympathetic, emotive treatment that the victims of the October 7th attack did. By the end of their survey sample, November 7th, the Palestinian death toll was over 10,000, with an estimated 70% of the victims being women and children. Nevertheless, Nonetheless, over that 30-day survey period, CNN and MSNBC used emotive words to describe the killing of Israelis 1,053 times and Palestinians only 43 times. You know, there's been a number of times where internal memos at these publications have leaked, giving people direct orders to soften the language, to not use words like genocide. Make sure you specify that the health ministry is the Hamas-run health ministry as a way to cast doubt on the death tolls, even though they have consistently been verified as reputable. Even being instructed to avoid using the word Palestine except in very rare cases, and avoid the term refugee camps as well, despite these areas being legally recognized by the United Nations as refugee camps. There is a seemingly endless amount of evidence for the phenomenon that Scahill is bringing up here, but the fact that he's bringing it up on the network, it just feels wild. You know, a year into manufacturing consent for genocide, these facts still largely go unacknowledged on these networks. So anyways, let's get back to the interview, where Scahill next turns to the question of Sinwar.
And yes, we should talk about Yahya Sinwar, but Yahya Sinwar is also in many ways the story of Gaza. You know, yes, this was a violent man, but his violence was rooted in the fact that he was born in a refugee camp. And Israel, throughout his entire life, waged a war of annihilation against the Palestinians. I'm not here to defend Yahya Sinwar. I'm here to say that we can't talk about who Yahya Sinwar was or what Hamas is without talking about 76 years of colonialism, of apartheid, of mass killing, of mowing the lawn, of controlling the calories.
Notice again here that while Scahill does acknowledge Sinwar's history of violence, he once again immediately turns the conversation back to its roots, back to the material conditions, the fact that Sinwar and everything he did were not created in a vacuum. Israel did calculate the calories to determine how much aid they would block from entering Gaza. Israel has repeatedly over the years entered into Gaza to brutalize and kill Palestinians, a policy which Israel itself does call mowing the lawn. Israel is an apartheid state. Israel is a settler colonial state, founded on ethnic cleansing, built on stolen lands, with people living in stolen homes. And this is an ongoing project. They're slaughtering everyone in Gaza and destroying everything in sight and bringing the bulldozers in to clear it out for settlement.
Blowing bubbles as Gaza burns. This weekend, over 100 people died in the north of the Strip. And as that was happening, not far away in southern Israel, settlers held a two-day event.
This whole area is one big terror cell. It has an infection. You have to take out the infection.
They set out their plans for Jewish outposts inside what will be left of Gaza if they get in. Celebrated the festival of Sukkot as the smell of homes on fire wafted in from the west.
Everything he says here is absolutely true. It's all ongoing, but it is almost never talked about in this way on these networks. Typically, the coverage looks more like bringing on people like U.S. State Department spokesperson Matt Miller. That same week, he came on to talk about Sinwar, and the first thing he does is lays the blame for Israel's genocidal onslaught on the Gaza Strip solely at Sinwar's feet.
It was his decision to unleash this war on October 7th that is now cost the lives of over 40,000 Palestinians.
In the minds of these officials, these people that must do everything they can to defend these genocidal actions. I've said it before, I'll say it again, nothing could ever justify October 7th, but October 7th justifies everything. Miller also accuses Sinwar of having been the main obstacle to the peace negotiation process.
In the past few months, he has been the chief obstacle to ending that war and alleviating the suffering of those Palestinians, to getting the hostages home, to providing real security for Israel and for the Palestinian people alike.
This is just not true. Netanyahu has consistently been the one obstructing the peace processes, most recently due to his last-minute insistence on Israel gaining control over the Philadelphia corridor, a proposal that's been described as a poison pill, one that both the Israeli public and Netanyahu's own security officials are opposed to. Miller frames Sinwar's death as like an opportunity for the White House to finally make peace and push for it with urgency.
We see this now as an opportunity, with him being eliminated, with him being gone, as the chance to push forward to try to get an agreement to end this war, to try to get an agreement to finally get those 101 hostages who still remain in Gaza home to their families, and to try to finally push for real lasting security for the Israeli and Palestinian people alike. And that's what we're going to be pushing for with urgency in the days ahead.
But from the day of this interview to now, Israel has only ramped up its ethnic cleansing campaign, and the White House has done nothing to stop it. The claim that MSNBC deleted the interview from their platforms began to to circulate on social media in recent days. And while I can't verify for sure whether or not the video was like deleted off of their channels, as of October 25th, it's still not uploaded to either MSNBC's official YouTube channel or onto Ayman's MSNBC website. And the week of that interview, MSNBC uploaded like 10 YouTube videos about Yahya Sinwar, including the one with Matt Miller. But Scahill's interview was not one of them. So why would MSNBC choose to not post this video? And well, you know, that should be obvious by now, right? We looked at those stats before about how strongly biased they are as a network against using humanizing language to talk about Palestinians or accurately describe their suffering, something that Scahill was actually willing to do.
This has to stop.
Right.
We can't just sit here as journalists or normal people or whatever your job is and watch human beings shredded and say that's self-defense. Nothing is self-defense about this. I've covered wars for 25 years. There is nothing about self-defense with what Israel is doing right now tonight in northern Gaza.
And the other reason this probably wasn't posted is that the United States presidential election is like 2 weeks away. MSNBC is doing everything in their power to get Kamala Harris elected, and the horrors that Scahill spoke of are Kamala Harris's doing. The conditions he described, the endless death, destruction, and starvation wrought upon Gaza. All of these things have been fully backed and funded by Kamala Harris and the Biden administration. The genocide would not be possible without them, and having a full grasp on that for a lot of people may make them a little hesitant at the ballot box. You know, given the reality of how biased these outlets are against talking about Gaza in an honest way, when the host didn't interrupt or cut Scahill off at the start, I was pretty surprised. I was surprised he even got invited on, to be honest. He has been a highly critical voice in his coverage of Israel in the past year. But then at the end of the interview, the following exchange takes place.
All right, Jeremy Scahill, I really appreciate you joining us tonight. I appreciate you, again, reminding the world what is happening in northern Gaza, as has been happening almost every day for the better part of a year. Thank you, my friend.
And people should know that you reported bravely from the ground in Gaza yourself, and you broke an incredibly important story back in 2014. So thank you for all of your incredibly important work on the ground there.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you so much. Take care.
It turns out that the host here, Ayman Mohyeldin, spent much of his early career reporting from Gaza, starting in 2005 and again in 2008 and then again in 2014. He was known and even praised by some for his empathetic coverage of the Palestinian people, something that was and clearly still is unique to the profession. Mohyeldin was actually there at the hotel overlooking the bluff during the 2014 Gaza beach bombing, where Israel slaughtered 4 young boys while they were playing on the beach. Ayman had apparently been kicking a soccer ball around with them just minutes before they were killed. If you go back and watch the footage he captured that day 10 years ago, it's shocking. Seeing the violence, the fear, the reaction from these boys' families and the people in their community. Sorrow, horror, and rage. Somehow even more shocking than this, though, is knowing that in the past year, this same thing has happened to tens of thousands of families. Tens of thousands of children have been murdered, and virtually none of them have received a second of coverage on any of these networks. Many of these families haven't even gotten a chance to mourn before being killed themselves. He's covered what's happened in Gaza more than most on the network in the last year, in a similarly empathetic manner. Like here on October 7th, the same day of the Hamas attacks, his coverage with another anchor, Ali Belshi, sort of deviated from the norm, especially for that time, when he was willing to zoom out from the attacks and look at the bigger picture.
What Hamas has tried to do repeatedly is to remind Israel that your deterrence, what you think is your deterrence, does not apply in this particular territory of the Palestinian enclave. And the reason why it doesn't matter is because Gaza has already been decimated.
Right.
The militants...
You cannot overstate that point. Gaza is 2 million people, a little more than 500,000 in Gaza City itself.
Right.
They do not have the ability to fish. They do not have the ability. They do not have control of their skies. They do not have an airport. They do not have an ability to get most medical care. They can't get cancer care because it requires things that the Israelis believe could be used as weapons. They can't get construction equipment. They can't get anything that could possibly become weaponry. It's actually kind of amazing that they've got rockets.
Exactly.
Clearly somebody's getting them rockets, but they do not exist as a normal people with self-determination.
Right.
Just days after this, actually, these two anchors, along with Mehdi Hassan, were allegedly shelved in their coverage and moved around on air in a way that became quite a scandal, as they are the 3 most prominent Muslim anchors on MSNBC. That's also happened before with Ayman. He was sent home from Gaza after his coverage of the beach bombing, and the story, despite being captured by him, was broken on air by a different journalist. Why am I going into all this? I don't really know. I just thought that was kind of interesting. I thought it was kind of full circle. But I guess the point I want to get to is, like, do all of these media figures need to go to Gaza and watch Israel kill children in order for them to speak about their lives in an honest way, in order to let a guest come on and try to get to the core of the truth about why this is happening? And I don't know. Obviously, there's bigger forces at play, but I'd like to think not. So anyways, guys, just a quick one today. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like the video. If you want to support the channel, I have a Patreon. You can join there. All right, y'all. See you on the next one.